When a hard-working employee discovers her charming boss is secretly stealing wages, dodging debts, and living a lavish lifestyle at others' expense, she decides enough is enough. Armed with damning evidence, she exposes her boss's web of lies in a public and humiliating showdown, triggering a cascade of scandals. But as the truth unravels, her boss strikes back with shocking accusations, forcing her to fight not just for justice but to protect her own reputation. What follows is a high-stakes battle of deception, betrayal, and retribution, where only one will come out on top. The smell of fresh-baked bread was the first thing that greeted me every morning as I stepped into the bakery. It was comforting, almost magical, like everything in my life might finally fall into place. For someone like me, scraping by in a small town, this job felt like a blessing. Carla, the owner, had made it seem like I was joining a family, not just a business. Her warm smile and enthusiastic energy were infectious. "Morning, sweetie," Carla chirped on my first day. "You're gonna love it here. We work hard, but we have fun. You're part of something special now." I believed her. Back then, I wanted to. After all, I'd just come out of a long streak of bad luck, laid off from my previous job, a mountain of bills piling up, and a landlord breathing down my neck. This job wasn't just a paycheck, it was hope. For the first few weeks, it seemed like everything was going smoothly. The bakery had a steady flow of customers, and I got to know the regulars, the older gentleman who always ordered a black coffee and a cinnamon roll, the young mom who bought cookies for her son after school, and the teenager who came in for an after-shift snack from his grocery store job. They were kind, simple people who made the days feel lighter. Carla, though, was another story. She had this charm about her, this way of making everyone feel like they were her favorite person in the world. But there was something about her that didn't sit quite right with me, even in those early days. She was just a little too polished, a little too perfect. I'd catch her in small lies, telling a customer we were out of an item because it was popular when I knew we hadn't ordered it in weeks, or exaggerating how successful the bakery was in front of local business owners. But I brushed it off. Everyone embellishes a little, don't they? It wasn't until my first paycheck came late that I started to wonder if something was wrong. "Oh, shoot, honey, I'm so sorry," Carla said when I asked her about it. "We had a little hiccup with payroll this week. Don't worry, you'll get it in a day or two. Thanks for being such a team player." I smiled politely and nodded, telling myself it was probably just an honest mistake. But the day or two turned into 4. Then 5. When I finally got paid, the amount was less than I'd been expecting, but Carla quickly brushed it off as a deduction for training hours. "Don't worry," she said. "Next paycheck will be back to normal. I've got it all under control." I wanted to believe her, but there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind that wouldn't let it go. Still, what choice did I have? I needed this job. Weeks turned into months, and the pattern repeated itself. My paychecks were always late, sometimes by days, sometimes by weeks. Carla always had an excuse. Business was slow. The bakery's overhead costs were high. The suppliers' invoices were due. "You're part of the family, right?" she'd say, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Families stick together during tough times." I didn't feel like family. I felt like a fool. My breaking point came one Friday afternoon. I'd worked a grueling double shift, covering for a coworker who'd called out sick. Exhausted and desperate, I decided to confront Carla about the money. "I really need to get paid today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My rent was due in 2 days, and I didn't have a single dollar to my name. Carla's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Oh, sweetie, I get it, I do. But, you know, we're all making sacrifices right now. I haven't even paid myself this month. Things will turn around soon, I promise." Her words felt like a slap to the face. I didn't believe her anymore. That night, as I closed up the bakery alone, I spotted a stack of papers on the counter. They were invoices from one of our suppliers, demanding payment for months of overdue bills. Beneath them was a return check, stamped with the words, "insufficient funds." My stomach churned. I opened the drawer where Carla kept her mail and found more of the same. Letters from vendors threatening to cut off our supply. Notices from the utility company warning of shutoffs. And at the bottom of the pile, a letter from a lawyer. She was drowning in debt. And yet, just a few days earlier, I'd overheard Carla bragging to a customer about her new SUV. Fully loaded, she'd said, beaming. It's a dream to drive. I felt sick. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Carla wasn't just mismanaging the bakery, she was cheating us. Me, the other employees, the suppliers, everyone. And she didn't even care. While we were struggling to make ends meet, she was living it up, pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I started paying closer attention to Carla. She always seemed to have money for herself. New clothes. Fancy lunches. Even weekend getaways. But every time I asked about my paycheck, she'd give me the same tired excuses. Next week. Soon. Just hang in there, sweetie. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed a plan. I started documenting everything. Every text, every email, every excuse she gave me. I took photos of the invoices and the bounced checks I'd found. I even recorded a few conversations where she admitted she couldn't pay me. It wasn't hard. Carla talked so much, she barely noticed when I turned my phone's voice recorder on during our team meetings. It wasn't just about me anymore. If Carla was doing this to me, who else was she screwing over? A week later, I ran into Emma, one of the bakery's former employees, at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me. "You're still working for Carla?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" Emma hesitated, then sighed. "She still owes me for my last 2 paychecks. I left months ago, but every time I ask about the money, she just ignores me. I gave up trying." My jaw clenched. It was worse than I thought. Carla wasn't just a bad boss, she was a thief. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. I thought about all the times I'd stayed late to clean up the bakery, all the extra shifts I'd taken to help her out, all the lies she'd told me to keep me hanging on. I thought about Emma and the other employees who had probably been cheated, just like me. And then I thought about Carla, sitting in her new SUV, smiling like she'd won. Something inside me snapped. If Carla wanted to play dirty, fine. But this time, I wasn't going to let her win. Would you like me to continue with the next chapter? The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Carla thought she was invincible, but she didn't realize the fire she had lit. I wasn't just going to sit around and let her get away with this. The first step was gathering more information. I started paying closer attention at work, keeping my ears open for anything I could use. It didn't take long to realize just how sloppy Carla was. She left invoices, receipts, and other documents lying around the bakery like they were junk mail. One afternoon, while Carla was out running errands, I took a closer look at her office. It was cluttered with papers, sticky notes, and unopened envelopes. My hands trembled as I sifted through the mess, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't stealing anything, I was just collecting evidence. The first thing I found was a ledger filled with numbers that didn't add up. Carla had been underreporting the bakery's income while inflating the expenses. She was making it look like the business was barely scraping by, but her bank statements told a different story. I found copies of her personal transactions, hundreds of dollars spent on spa days, designer handbags, and luxury dining. But the real jackpot was in a folder labeled "Legal." It was full of letters from lawyers, creditors, and former employees threatening to sue. I even found a complaint from the Department of Labor, accusing Carla of violating wage and hour laws. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, making sure to put everything back exactly as I'd found it. My heart was racing the entire time, but when I stepped out of her office, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I finally had the proof I needed. That night, I started reaching out to people Carla had wronged. Emma was my first call. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can we talk?" Emma agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the next day. When I showed her the photos I'd taken, her eyes widened. She's been doing this for years, Emma said, shaking her head. I knew she was shady, but this is criminal. Emma wasn't the only one with a story to tell. Over the next few days, I tracked down 2 more former employees who had similar complaints. Carla had cheated all of them out of their pay, using the same excuses she'd given me. She told me the bakery couldn't afford to pay me, one of them said bitterly. Meanwhile, she was posting pictures of her vacation in Hawaii. I also contacted a few of the bakery suppliers, pretending to be a curious customer. It didn't take much to get them talking. They were all furious with Carla for stiffing them on payments. One of them even mentioned that he was considering filing a lawsuit. Piece by piece, I was building a case against her. But I knew I couldn't take her down alone. I needed backup. The next step was reaching out to the media. There was a local news reporter, Allison Grant, who had a reputation for exposing shady business practices. I'd seen her take down a corrupt landlord just a few months earlier, and I knew she'd be interested in Carla's story. I sent her an anonymous email, attaching some of the photos I'd taken. I kept it vague at first, explaining that the owner of a popular local bakery was exploiting her employees and suppliers. To my surprise, Allison responded within an hour. "This is serious," she wrote. "Can you meet to discuss this in person?" We arranged to meet at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. I showed up early, my heart pounding with nerves. When Allison arrived, she was exactly how I'd imagined, sharp, no nonsense, and ready to dig into the truth. "So," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Tell me everything." I laid it all out for her, the late paychecks, the unpaid invoices, the bounced checks, and the luxury purchases. I showed her the photos I'd taken and told her about the former employees who were willing to speak out. "This is bigger than just a bad boss," Allison said, her brow furrowed. "If what you're saying is true, she's breaking the law. Wage theft, tax fraud, embezzlement, it's all here." She asked if I'd be willing to go on record, but I hesitated. I wasn't ready to put my name out there just yet. "For now, let's keep it anonymous," I said. Allison nodded. "Fair enough. But if we're going to take her down, we need to hit her where it hurts, the public eye. People need to know who she really is." Over the next week, things at the bakery carried on as usual, at least on the surface. Carla had no idea what was coming. She was still strutting around, smiling at customers and posting pictures of her pastries online like everything was perfect. But behind the scenes, the walls were closing in. Allison was working on a story for the evening news, and the former employees I'd spoken to had agreed to be interviewed. I also tipped off a few of the bakery suppliers, who were more than happy to share their grievances with the press. Meanwhile, I started planting seeds of doubt among the current staff. I casually mentioned that my paycheck was late again, and it wasn't long before others started speaking up. "Yeah, mine too," one coworker said. "She always has an excuse, but it's getting ridiculous." By the end of the week, there was a quiet rebellion brewing. Carla still acted like everything was fine, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Allison called me with an update. "The story's airing this Friday," she said. "But I've got one more question, do you want to be there when it breaks?" I hesitated, thinking about the risks. If Carla found out I was behind this, she'd probably try to retaliate. But then I thought about everything she'd done, the lies, the manipulation, the theft. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'll be there." That Friday, Carla was hosting a big event at the bakery, a community fundraiser she'd been hyping up for weeks. It was supposed to be her moment to shine, to show off her success to the whole town. But as the bakery filled with customers, reporters, and local officials, I couldn't help but smile. Carla had no idea what was about to hit her. The bakery buzzed with energy that Friday night. Carla was in her element, greeting guests with exaggerated smiles and loud laughs, her gold necklace catching the light every time she leaned in to shake someone's hand. She had pulled out all the stops, platters of pastries, an espresso bar, even a raffle for free cakes. To everyone else, she looked like the picture of success. To me, she looked like a fraud who was about to get what she deserved. I lingered near the back of the bakery, blending in with the crowd. Allison had texted me earlier to say she was on her way, along with her camera crew. She wanted to catch Carla off guard, to make sure the story landed like a bombshell. I glanced at the clock. 7:30. Right on time. When the bakery door swung open, my heart leapt into my throat. Allison entered with a confident stride, her cameraman close behind. A microphone in one hand and her phone in the other, she scanned the room until her eyes locked on Carla. The moment had arrived. Carla was mid-sentence, charming a group of local officials, when Allison approached. "Ms. Peterson," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter in the bakery. Carla turned, her smile faltering slightly. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm Allison Grant with Channel 6 News," Allison said, holding up her microphone. The camera was already rolling, its red light blinking ominously. "I'd like to ask you a few questions about your business practices." The bakery went silent. Guests exchanged confused glances, some pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Carla's face turned an unnatural shade of pink as she tried to recover her composure. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her voice tight. Allison didn't miss a beat. "We've received multiple reports from former employees and suppliers accusing you of wage theft and fraud. Would you care to comment?" Carla's smile froze, and for a moment, I thought she might try to laugh it off. But Allison wasn't giving her an inch. "These are serious allegations," Allison continued, pulling out a stack of papers. "We have evidence of unpaid wages, bounced checks, and even complaints filed with the Department of Labor. How do you respond to these claims?" The crowd began to murmur. Carla glanced around, clearly panicking. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "Who told you this? Who's making these accusations?" Allison didn't answer. Instead, she gestured toward the back of the room. Emma, one of the former employees I'd contacted, stepped forward, her face calm but determined. "I did," Emma said loudly. "And I'm not the only one." Another former employee, Mark, joined her. Then one of the bakery's suppliers, a gruff man named Henry, spoke up from near the counter. "She hasn't paid me in 6 months," he said, his voice like gravel. "But she's got money for a new car, doesn't she?" Carla's eyes darted around the room, her panic turning to anger. "This is a setup," she shouted, her voice rising. "These people are just trying to ruin me." Allison raised an eyebrow. "We've also spoken with customers who say you've misled them about the bakery's financial situation," she said. "And we've uncovered discrepancies in your tax filings that suggest you've been underreporting income. Would you like to comment on that?" Carla opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She looked like a cornered animal, her carefully curated image crumbling before everyone's eyes. As the confrontation played out, I stayed in the back, watching with a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. It was actually happening. Carla was being exposed for who she really was, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Allison's cameraman captured every moment, from Carla's stammered denials to the damning testimony from her former employees and suppliers. By the time the interview ended, the mood in the bakery had shifted entirely. Guests who had come to support Carla were now glaring at her, whispering to each other as they slowly began to leave. Carla tried to regain control, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Peterson," Allison said, her tone icy. "We'll be airing the full story tonight at 10. With that, she turned and walked out, her cameraman following close behind. The bakery emptied out quickly after that. Carla stood near the counter, her face pale and her hands trembling as she gathered the leftover pastries. No one stayed to comfort her. Even her closest friends seemed to have disappeared, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. I waited until the room was nearly empty before stepping forward. "You knew this was coming," I said quietly. Carla whipped around, her eyes narrowing. "It was you," she hissed. "You did this." I didn't deny it. "You stole from me. From all of us. Did you really think you could get away with it forever?" "You don't understand," she snapped. "I was doing what I had to do to keep the business alive. You have no idea how hard it is to run a place like this. Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim. You lied. You cheated. And now, you're paying the price. Carla glared at me, but she didn't have a comeback. For the first time since I'd started working for her, she was speechless. I turned and walked out of the bakery, the cool night air hitting my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I felt lighter than I had in months, like a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. That night, I watched the news with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Allison's story was even more damning than I'd expected. She had dug deeper than I realized, uncovering details about Carla's unpaid debts, her fraudulent tax filings, and even a few lawsuits from years ago that she'd managed to sweep under the rug. The segment ended with a statement from the Department of Labor, confirming that they were launching an investigation into the bakery. It was over. Carla's empire had crumbled in a matter of hours, and the whole town knew it. The next few weeks were chaotic. The fallout from Allison's story spread like wildfire. Carla's face was everywhere, on the local news, in online articles, and even in whispered conversations at the grocery store. People who had once adored her were now calling her a con artist, a liar. Customers boycotted the bakery, vendors cut off supplies, and the staff quit one by one. I wasn't surprised when the bakery shut its doors. The "For Lease" sign went up in the window just 2 weeks after the story aired. Carla disappeared after that, and for a little while, I thought it was over. But I was wrong. One rainy Thursday evening, I was walking home from my new job, a catering gig at a local event center, when I got a text from Emma. "Emma, have you seen this? Check your email. Now." Curious, I opened my inbox. There was an email from Emma with a single link and no explanation. Clicking on it, I found myself on a blog, one I didn't recognize. The post was titled, "The Real Story Behind Carla Peterson, Victim or Villain." My stomach tightened as I scrolled through the post. It was written in Carla's voice, or at least someone claiming to be her. In it, Carla painted herself as the victim of a conspiracy. She claimed that the bakery had been sabotaged by disgruntled employees and jealous competitors who wanted to see her fail. But then, as I read further, my heart dropped. Carla wasn't just trying to shift the blame, she was naming names. Specifically, my name. She accused me of stealing from the bakery, claiming that I had taken money from the register and staged everything to make her look bad. She even implied that I had bribed Allison to run the story. Carla didn't stop there, she posted photos of me working in the bakery, screenshots of text messages we'd exchanged, completely out of context, and even my personal information, including my full name and the city I lived in. It was a complete hit job. The comments were already piling up. Some people sympathized with Carla, saying she'd been unfairly targeted. Others doubted her story, calling her out for her past behavior. But the damage was done, my name was out there, and people were starting to talk. I spent the next few days in a haze of anxiety. Everywhere I went, I felt like people were staring at me, whispering behind my back. My new boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay after a customer mentioned the blog. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding guilty, so I just said it was an old grudge and left it at that. Then, one morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Allison. "Hey," she said, her voice sharp. "Have you seen the blog Carla posted? I think you should come to the station. There's something you need to see." When I arrived at the station, Allison was waiting for me in her office. She gestured for me to sit down, her expression unreadable. "We've been keeping tabs on Carla since the story aired," she said, pulling up a file on her computer. "And last night, we got a tip from someone claiming to be one of her former business partners. Turns out, Carla's bakery isn't the first time she's pulled something like this." Allison clicked on a folder labeled Peterson Fraud. Inside were scanned documents, photos, and even video clips. "Before Carla moved here, she ran a boutique in another town," Allison explained. "She did the same thing there, underpaid her staff, dodged her bills, and used the business as her personal piggy bank. When it all fell apart, she skipped town and reinvented herself as a self-made entrepreneur. I stared at the screen, my anger bubbling back to the surface. Of course she'd done this before. Carla hadn't just been careless, she was a professional scammer. But Allison wasn't finished. "There's more," she said, leaning back in her chair. "One of our investigators found something interesting." She opened a new tab and played a surveillance video from the bakery. It showed Carla late at night, standing near the register with a large envelope in her hands. She looked nervous, glancing around before slipping the envelope into her purse. The timestamp was from a few days before the news story broke. "What's in the envelope?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. "Cash," Allison said. "Thousands of dollars." She was skimming from the bakery's emergency fund while claiming she couldn't pay her employees. My jaw clenched. I'd always known Carla was corrupt, but seeing it laid out so plainly made my blood boil. But then Allison paused the video and turned to me, her expression cautious. "There's something else. This isn't just about Carla anymore." "What do you mean?" "All of this, the fraud, the blog post, the accusations against you, it's part of a bigger play," Allison said. "Carla didn't write that blog post alone. She had help." She pulled up an email exchange between Carla and a name I didn't recognize, Martin Stone. "Who's that?" I asked. Allison's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's a lawyer. Specifically, a lawyer who specializes in defamation cases. Carla's trying to spin this into a lawsuit against you, the other employees, and possibly even the news station. She's desperate, and this is her Hail Mary." My head was spinning. Carla wasn't just trying to save face, she was going on the offensive. If she succeeded, she could ruin my life, not to mention the lives of everyone else who had spoken out against her. "I'm not going to let her get away with this," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Good," Allison said. "Because I have a plan." Over the next week, Allison and her team worked tirelessly to piece together the final nail in Carla's coffin. They dug up financial records, interviewed more former employees, and even got a statement from one of Carla's old landlords who confirmed she had fled town to avoid paying rent. The key, however, came from an unexpected source, Henry, the gruff supplier who had spoken out at the bakery. He had kept meticulous records of every payment Carla had missed, and one of his invoices included a handwritten note from Carla herself, promising to make it right if he didn't report her to the authorities. That note, combined with the surveillance footage in her past behavior, was enough to take to the authorities. 2 weeks later, Carla was arrested. The charges included fraud, wage theft, and tax evasion. The news was everywhere, this time, not just local but statewide. The story painted Carla as the con artist she was, and any remaining sympathy she had left evaporated overnight. As for the blog, it disappeared within hours of her arrest, along with any trace of her attempts to shift the blame. In the end, justice was served, but the whole ordeal left a bitter taste in my mouth. Carla had tried to destroy me, to paint herself as the victim in a story where she was the villain all along. But I'd learned something important through it all: people like Carla can't hide forever. Eventually, the truth catches up to them. And when it does, it's not just justice. It's poetic.